Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Richmond Public Library Presents Young Writers Workshop. I'm Mr. Lewis from the Ginter Park Library, and today we will be discussing plotting versus pantsing, which is also known as discovery writing. Basically, we're going to be covering how much prep work you're going to be doing with your story. How much do you want to plan out ahead of time? How much do you want to just kind of make up as you go along? So we'll start with plotting. Plotting is being able to visualize the path of your story ahead of time. What we mean by this is basically planning everything out, the major parts, the minor parts if you want, but having everything already structured in your head so you know exactly where you're going at any given time. So we figure out the path of our story by setting certain goals throughout the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. We call these beats because, like in music, the beats can give a story a rhythm that can keep the story moving forward. So the idea is that the action would go from one beat to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and this moves your story forward. Now, plotting is usually done with an outline, so we use an outline to organize the major beats of the story so that they are easier to understand and build toward. So we would start with an introduction, which could be a prologue or just chapter one, and then you have the major parts of that chapter, then chapter two, then the major parts of that chapter, not in detail, just like a single sentence that describes what is going to happen in that section of the story. So why would you want to use plotting? Well, I always like to make a pros and cons list to kind of help visualize why one option might be better than another. So for plotting, some of the pros are a fully visualized path for your story. You know exactly where you're going ahead of time. It's like planning out your route with a map ahead of time. So you know exactly which turns to take, how long it's going to take you, things like that. You also have the ability to be as detailed or as vague as you need. Some outlines might be very detailed, where every chapter has every single part of that chapter already outlined with a sentence describing it down to small details. Or you could just have, the very basics, just a couple sentences for each chapter, just to give you an idea of what is going to happen there. And you are quickly able to adapt or edit your path as needed. So you can move things around. You can say, okay, well, as I'm writing this, I see that this section does not fit in this chapter. So all I have to do is take it from this outline and move it to a different section. And it's just that simple. This way, you are able to do some editing even before you actually get to the story process. But there are some cons to this. First of all, it is a very rigid structure. What I mean by that is there's not a lot of wiggle room for how you want to go. Say you're writing something, and as you're writing, it seems, oh, maybe I want to go in this direction, but your outline says you can't. So do you stick with the outline or do you try to go with the flow? It really makes things somewhat difficult depending on how you like to write. Sometimes the finished product can feel a little forced. What I mean by this is if you have your structure planned out ahead of time and you are very strict by sticking to that structure, it might not work. It might work just fine, but it might not work because it feels like you had your ending already set and everything you did was basically forcing the story to reach that conclusion ahead of time instead of letting it develop naturally. And lastly, it sometimes can take the fun out of writing. It feels almost like a homework assignment. Now, this is a very personal and subjective thing, obviously. So maybe you love outlining, maybe plotting is perfect for you. And if it is, that's fine. There is no right or wrong answer here. But for some people, it might feel like, well, I'm just following the notes in this point. Where's the actual fun of the writing? Where's the discovery? Where's the enjoyment? But again, it really depends on how you feel about it. Discovery writing. Now, discovery writing is also known as pantsing, as in writing by the seat of your pants. You've heard the expression flying by the seat of your pants. This is writing by the seat of your pants. You're just going. All it is freeform writing. You just sit down and you write. You put pencil to paper, you open up your computer, your Microsoft Word document, whatever it is, and you just start writing and see what happens, see where it takes you. There can be a basic structure. Maybe you have the basic ideas of a plot ahead of time. Maybe not. Maybe you just have like a character in mind. So You put the character in a spot and you say, well, now what happens? What would your character do? So as you're writing, the majority of your plot becomes known even to you. So it's discovered as you are writing itself. So there are, of course, pros and cons with this as well. So some of the pros are the writing feels more natural. It comes to you as you are doing the writing itself, and often it makes more sense when you do it that way because as you are writing it, you're discovering along with the characters that you're writing what's going to happen next. The plot has room to grow and evolve over time. Maybe you have an idea ahead of time, but as you're writing, something that your character does gives you ideas that will help you branch into other directions that you originally had no idea were possible. So your story itself might completely change as you are writing. And the characters themselves can help direct the flow of the story. The more you write your characters, the more you get to know them. This might sound odd to someone who has not written a lot, but your characters really can come to life. They will make decisions that you will understand whether or not they are in character or not. The more you write a character, the more you will understand this character would do this, but they would never do that. So as you're writing, you might say, well, I thought the story was going to go this way, but now that I know this character more, I don't think they would do that. So now your story starts to go into a different direction, which you maybe had not originally planned on. But of course, there are cons, and one is it is much easier to get writer's block with discovery writing. If you don't know have a plan for where you're going, it's very easy to say, now what? And you're stuck. Some people have this problem all the time. Some people hardly ever have it, but I don't think there's a writer on earth who has never had writer's block. If you're not prepared, the story can get away from you. Sometimes it's not a good thing to have your story meander and grow too far away from your original plot. If the story gets completely out of hand, then you might lose the entire purpose of the story as you were writing it originally. So if you sat down to write like an adventure story and you end up with a mystery, maybe you like that, but maybe it's not what you wanted to write. So the story can get away from you if you're not careful. And sometimes you can write yourself into a corner. If you don't know where you're going, sometimes you hit a dead end and you have to backtrack and say, well, now what? I have to go back to, at some point, and find out where I went wrong. It's like if you're taking a drive and you say, I know exactly where I'm going, but then halfway there, you're like, I have no idea where I am. And now you have to stop, turn around, and find out where you went wrong. So now that we have an idea of what plotting and pantsing are, how do we decide which one is right for us? How do you determine how detailed or not detailed you want to be? Well, the answer really depends on your own personality, as well as how much of your story you already have planned out. If you've already spent a lot of time planning your story, then the plotting is most likely your better option. But if you just have a basic idea, maybe try pantsing, see if it works out. Maybe you prefer having structure, maybe you prefer just going at it and see what happens. There's no right or wrong answer here again. It's just which one works best for you now that you know what the two options are. However, there is one thing that you have to realize, and that is that you can combine the two methods. There's no need to stick with just one. Very few people are 100% plotting or 100% pantsing. It's not only possible, but it's encouraged to combine the two methods. Sometimes you can have a very basic structure for your story, but you can allow it to develop more fully as you write. Maybe you just have a sentence per chapter to give you a basic idea of what's going to happen, and then you can just kind of fill in the rest from there. So you have an idea of where the major beats of your story are, but how you get to those beats is still very much up to you and to your characters. Or you can go the opposite way. You could have a mostly full outline, but with some points purposely left out to allow for more natural development. Maybe you're very detailed, but you're not 100% sure about how you want things to work out, or you recognize that there might be room for natural development in certain spots. So even though you're mostly detailed, you still have enough room to let the story grow on its own. So which is right for you? Any, all, either, doesn't matter. Just enjoy what you do, and however you decide to write, just write. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you have any questions or feedback for me, you can find my contact information in the video description below. There you can also find a link to our webpage for this program on our Richmond Public Library website. You can find information about our Discord channel, as well as writing tips and writing prompts that I will be updating regularly. So until the next video, thank you all so much, stay safe, and keep writing.